You're listening to Life, the Universe, and Everything Else. Today on the show, scientifically proven buzzkills. Life, the Universe, and Everything Else explores the intersection of science and society. Original music is produced by Ian James, and this episode was edited by Marissa McCool. Find her on Patreon at patreon.com/QAF. I'm Lauren Bailey, and with me tonight I have Ashlyn Noble.
Hello.
Laura Creek Newman.
Hi there.
And Jem Newman.
Hello.
In true LUEE fashion, on this month's show, we've each taken a perfectly good mystery and ruined it with easily accessible scientific explanations. I'm going to kick us off with the mystery that inspired this topic, Dyatlov Pass Incident. "64 years ago, from the week that we're recording this, something very weird happened in the Ural Mountains. Probably several somethings weird, but we're going to focus on the one that got the big media coverage. Well, big for the Soviet Union in the 50s. Igor Dyatlov led a group of 10 young yet experienced hikers/skiers on an expedition across the northern Ural Mountains. All of the members were students and members of the hiking club at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, and they were all rated as grade 2 hikers. And they would be using this trip as their basis for getting their grade 3, which was the highest available to them at the time. They needed to do a grade 3 level hike in order to get their grade 3 certification. So what I'm saying here is that these 10 folks, although they were very young, they were tried and level-headed hikers. None of them were known to drink, and any smokers in the group gave it up before going on the expedition. This was a huge goal for them, and they set off immediately upon receiving their government permissions on January 23, 1959.
So I have been a fan of podcasts and things of this sort of genre for a long time, as I will talk about in my segment. But I had never heard that there was like a grading system for hiking that was involved here. And now I want to know about the grading system for hiking so that I can achieve it.
I knew that's how you were going to end it.
I need like the Girl Scout badge for adults that this implies.
Well, luckily, even though I don't mention it a lot in my segment, I do have in with the show notes the current listing for the world hiking certifications, so
Excellent.
have at it.
It says class 6. That means only the most experienced climbers.
How tough could it be? It's this far!
The 8 men and 2 women set out by train, and then they caught a ride with a truck to Vizhai, which was the last settlement near the start of their hike. On January 27, when the group was preparing to start skiing, one of the hikers, Yuri Yudin, had to stop because of his health, and he returned with the local guide who had been taking them north. And Yuri did not know how lucky he was. He made it home on February 2. The rest of the group is expected home by February 12, though they had sent word of an approximate 3-day delay with Yudin, who then forgot to tell anyone.
Oh no!
That's not cool.
Yeah, well,
that's
he
like
didn't...
number one hiking out in the wilderness, right? Tell people where you are and if there's going to be changes to your itinerary.
Yeah, and when you're
He
going to
didn't
get
go back. Yeah, they didn't. They thought he was going to go back to the university right away, but he just went to his hometown instead. Yeah, he was 19 years old. And he was in a lot of pain. It's not an excuse, but... On February 1, the hikers, they were very tired with the extremely deep snow, and they spent the first part of the day constructing a temporary storage shelter for their return hike supplies, because there's no need to cart extra cans and spare skis up a snowy mountain. The group then skied all afternoon and arrived at what would be known as the Dyatlov Pass at around 1500 hours. It's never good when it's named after your group. The sun set at about 1700 hours. They had set the tent on the eastern slope of the mountain at an altitude of 1,079 meters. The group had kept hike diaries, and they took several rolls of film because they would need them as evidence to receive this grade 3 hiking certificate that they were going for. The recovered pictures, because they recovered a lot of the pictures, show average, goofy folks in their late teens and early 20s doing an activity that they loved and they were good at. The final picture, though, which was taken February 1, it's extremely eerie. The snow and wind were worsening, and the shot shows the line of people skiing, taken by the last person in line, and the skiers ahead get fainter and fainter by each person until they disappear into the blowing snow. On February 15, the group was expected to be back in contact both with the university and with their families. But, as we said before, since Yuri Yudin didn't contact anybody about the expected delay, as I said, he had gone directly home and not to the university, the families of the hikers were already getting worried because they were supposed to, as far as they knew, check in on February 12. Dyatlov's sister contacted the university on February 16, and then on February 17, the university sent a telegram to Vizhay, which is the last city that the group left. They heard back on the 19th that the group had not yet arrived back from up the mountain, and so the university started to assemble a mountain search and rescue team. The search team set off the next morning, which was the same day that Yudin returned to the university, and found out that his friends were still missing on the mountain. I don't know why, but this is the part of the story that really gets me. He's returning, he's excited to see his friends and hear all about the rest of the trip, and nothing. It's just a very human moment.
But I guess no harm done not telling anybody, because it would have been worse if it was the other way around, where they said, oh, we're planning to come back earlier, and he didn't tell anybody.
Yeah. And this was 1959, so I mean, there was no other way to really get any information down the mountain, right? So Yudin returns, and meanwhile, the search has started for the 9 missing hikers, including the search team included members of the Ural Polytechnical Sports Club, who flew up by plane and helicopter, but then they had to halt the search because the weather was too bad up on the mountain. And the regional prosecutor's office also opened a criminal investigation into what happened to the hikers, and he also joined the search. The search continued from February 20th through 26th, when the searchers then found Dyatlov Party's tent on the eastern slope of the Hochatal Mountain. And I apologize if I have butchered the name of that mountain. So this campsite, this tent, baffled the search party. The student who found the tent, who was named Mikhail Sherevin, said, and I quote, "The tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all of the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. There were 9 set of footprints, left by people wearing only socks or a single shoe, and even barefoot. And these footprints, they followed them, leading down to the edge of the nearby woods, on the opposite side of the pass. So it was 1.5 kilometers to the northeast. After 500 meters, these tracks were covered in with snow. Right at the edge of the forest, under a big Siberian pine tree, the searchers found the remains of a small fire. Beside this small fire, there were the first 2 bodies. There was Yuri Kuroshenko and Yuri Doroshenko. 3 of the men on this expedition were named Yuri. And both of them were shoeless, and they were dressed only in their underwear. The branches on the tree above them were broken up to about 5 meters high, so that suggested that one of the skiers had climbed up to look for something, perhaps trying to find where the camp was, after they had fled. Between the pine and the camp, so digging backwards, the searchers then found 3 more corpses. Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolomogrovia, and Rustam Slobodin, and they all died in poses suggested that they were attempting to return to the tent. They were trying to head back up the slope. In March of 1959, forensics examinations showed that the hikers had died of hypothermia. In April, the tent had had examinations done, and it was determined that it had been cut from the inside and not the outside. So the prevailing theory had been at that point that somebody had attacked them and they had run out of the tent after somebody had ripped it, but it was shown that they ripped the tent themselves with a knife. So they weren't attacked by a wild animal or a Yeti or somebody attacking them. It was another 2 months before they found the 4 remaining hikers. They were found on May 4, under 4 meters of snow, in a ravine 75 meters further into the woods from the pine tree. So 3 of these 4 were better dressed than the others, and there were signs that some of the clothing they were wearing had been taken from the people who had died by the fire or by the pine tree. One of the hikers was wearing somebody else's torn trousers, and her left foot and shin were wrapped in somebody else's torn jacket. So it looked like they had all run down and made this fire, and then some had tried to hike back up, and some had tried to hike back down after the others had died. That's creepy. In May of 1959, radiological tests came back to say that the clothing from the bodies found deeper in the ravine, the ones had fallen off, they had higher than normal levels of radiation than other people. We don't know why, but that was the basis for theories like, was it aliens? Was it a nuclear attack? All those sorts of things.
Well, if they were found in a ravine, though, presumably the background radiation would be a little bit different in that region than in other regions. I mean, like, depending on the geological structure underlying the region, you're going to have different levels of background radiation. I know Winnipeg, for example, has many multiples of the normal background radiation compared to other parts of Canada.
Really?
I mean, that's not surprising, but...
Yeah, living in Winnipeg is... Living anywhere on the surface will be the equivalent of, like, having... or getting an x-ray taken, like a chest x-ray, is the equivalent of so many days or weeks or months of background radiation in a certain location, and Winnipeg is much higher than others.
Neat.
That's cool.
It's more bad than cool, I would say, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
Not good for the DNA.
Cool. Yeah.
I worry about how much time we spend in our basement, because I'm sure it's never had any sort of, like, radon remediation or anything.
And I would recommend, especially for people living in Manitoba, you can send away for a kit. It costs like $50, and you basically stick it in your basement for, I think it's like 3 months, and then you mail it back, and they'll give you a report.
My parents had that done. And
I did that a couple of years ago, and we were okay. So
really?
Good.
It automatically, though, if you fail the test, you have to start the remediation process.
Yeah, but I mean, for the sake of, like, I don't want you folks to die of lung cancer either, so...
Yeah.
No, it's better to know. Anyway, back to Russia. The why, what happened, remained a mystery for around 50 years. As I said before, was it a Yeti? Was it an avalanche? Was it group madness? Why had these hikers cut up a perfectly good tent and run out in their sleeping clothes to die from hypothermia or to fall off a ravine in the dark? A few months ago, I read the 2013 book Dead Mountain by Donnie Icar. He's an American documentarian. He retraced the route of the Dyatlov expedition, and then he spoke to a bunch of scientists. This research team came to the conclusion that it was most likely infrasound, namely a Kármán vortex street that drove the hikers out of their tent and into the cold. According to the theory, the infrasound generated by the wind as it passed over the top of the Halacho mountain was responsible for causing physical discomfort and mental distress in the hikers. Because of their panic, the hikers were driven to leave the tent by whatever means necessary, and they fled down the slope. By the time they were further down the hill, they would have been out of the infrasound's path, and they would have regained their composure, stopped panicking, but in the darkness they would have been unable to return to their shelter. And there was traumatic injuries suffered by 3 of the victims, where they stumbled over the edge of the ravine in the darkness and landing on the rocks at the bottom. If we look at fluid dynamics, a Kármán vortex street is a repeating pattern of swirling vortices caused by a process known as vortex shedding, which is responsible for the unsteady separation of flow of a fluid around blunt bodies. So it's a disruption of the air around this solitary mountain. If you've
when
ever
you have
heard...
a rock in a stream?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And if you've ever heard power lines singing in a windstorm, anybody ever heard that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is the sound of a vortex street.
Okay.
Vortex street? Vortex stream?
Street. As in Portage Avenue, but Main Street.
Gotcha.
So to continue with the vortex street, the flow of atmospheric air over obstacles, like these mountains, creates these vortex street. When a cloud layer is present at a correct altitude, so it's got to be right bang on, you can see these streets in the cloud cover. Yeah, they can be up to like 400 kilometers away from the obstacle, but then sort of like move closer towards it. And they're usually about 20 to 40 kilometers across these anomalies. If you look at cloud patterns or tests with fluid dynamics, a vortex street looks like a curving and shifting spiral of air trapped inside a normal wind pattern. So like there's these circles, and literally it's a vortex. I'm making like a circle with my hands as if you could see it.
Mm-hmm.
This is for the folks watching the live feed at home.
Yeah. Look for that.
Oh, yeah. I was going to set up my camera and I forgot.
So it looks like a series of little tornadoes working together in a spiral with the normal airflow pushing over top of them and below them.
That's cool.
Yeah. It took me a long time to figure out how to explain that. Because fluid dynamics, surprisingly, not my cup of tea. Knowing what we do about infrasound, I'm really inclined to believe this theory. Infrasound has been proven to cause panic attacks in humans. We've talked about it on the show before. It's the cause of that eerie feeling that people attribute to ghosts. It's a low-frequency sound. It describes sound waves with a frequency below the lower limit of human audibility, so it's about 20 hertz or below. And since our hearing becomes gradually less sensitive as frequency decreases, so for us to perceive infrasound, the sound pressure has to be really high, so like a vortex street. So you've got a really low down sound and huge sound pressure, so it's just building up in you. And instead of the ear hearing it, because it's below our level of hearing, at higher intensities, you can feel it in various parts of your body, like in your gut or your chest. Like it'll cause anxiety, it'll give you like panic attacks, or it'll give you what I call terror tummy, which is probably TMI, but when you're so scared you have to poop.
Yeah.
Yeah. So infrasound will do that. So that is one of the scientific theories for the Dyatlov Pass Incident. The mountain used its deep and scary voice to get out, well, to tell them to get out, and they did in the most tragic way possible. Another, and the official theory, is a slab avalanche. In July 2020, the deputy head of the Urals Federal District Directorate of the Prosecutor General's Office announced that an avalanche had to be the official cause of death for the Dyatlov group. Later, independent computer simulations by Swiss researchers also suggested an avalanche. A report in The New Yorker stated, quote, "The most appealing aspect of Kurikov's scenario is that the Dyatlov's party's actions no longer seemed irrational. The snow slab avalanche, according to Green, would probably have made loud cracks and rumbles as it fell across the tent, making an avalanche seem imminent. Kurikov noted that although the skiers made an error in the placement of their tent, everything they did subsequently was textbook. They conducted an emergency evacuation to ground that would be safe from an avalanche. They took shelter in the woods, they started a fire, they dug a snow cave. Had they been less experienced, they would have remained near the tent, dug it out, and survived. But avalanches are by far the biggest risks to mountains in the winter, and the more experience you have, the more you fear them. The skiers' expertise doomed them. There are also... Yeah, that's a hard line.
That's rough.
There's evidence against an avalanche as well, including tent placement models, where if an avalanche had come down, it would have been nowhere near where their tent was. They wouldn't have felt that kind of, oh shit, we have to get out. Over 100 subsequent expeditions to this area had not seen any sort of avalanche activity, especially in February, when the weather wasn't conducive to avalanches. They are more prevalent in the spring melt in April and May. And Dyatlov and his team were experienced hikers and skiers, and they knew the similar terrain, and they would not have camped in the path of a potential avalanche. Like they didn't set up their tent in any sort of panic, like the, oh no, where the night's coming on. It was calm and measured, according to their diaries that they found. So, in the 6 decades since the incidents, the infrasound and the avalanche are the two most accepted theories. Yeti, Soviet military testing, and attacks by local indigenous groups have also been floated, but obviously never been proven. As I said, I prefer the Kármán Vortex Street because it makes the most sense to me, having seen other evidence of what infrasound can do. But I might be biased because I read the book first rather than hearing the official Russian scientific explanation for avalanches that they've never seen in the area. So I disagree with the official, but it was definitely something scientifically proven and not a Yeti.
Interesting.
Yeti! I am the Yeti! Not
I
a
always
Yeti.
wondered... I always wondered if it had just been one of them got up in the middle of the night to like go have a pee or something, and then got lost and was calling, and there was kind of like just a trail of ducks led out to try to rescue each other, and they got lost in the snow.
But I mean, that was floated as well, but why would they not put their boots on? And why would they cut a hole in the side of the tent?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, why wouldn't they use the door for something that they had to use the same tent for the next, 5 or 6 nights as well?
Yeah. Lauren, I think it's fair to not just automatically trust the official Soviet government line on unexplained things. Because...
Yeah.
I think it's fair to look for corroboration.
Yeah.
Huh. Next, Laura's going to be saying that the hold of my R was real.
I don't know what that is. Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. I wasn't familiar with that pronunciation.
Yeah, it was not the correct pronunciation, that's why.
I was like, I thought you said like a weird way of saying gold in my ear, and I'm like, what is happening right now?
She was real.
She was real.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Very confused and not understanding where this was going. Okay. I get it. It was a good joke. I'm sorry I didn't understand what you said.
It's late.
Story of my life.
Yeah.
So, Jem and I have been to Rome. Have either of you been to Rome?
I have never left this continent.
Okay. If you get the chance, it's a fantastic city. We thoroughly enjoyed it there. There's so much to do. And as anyone who has heard much about Rome will know, is there is a lot of ancient stuff there, like buildings and stuff. And one of the most talked about is the Pantheon.
Yeah.
And it is truly incredible when you go to see it. And it's quite interesting because you just come around the corner and you're like, boom, there it is. You don't expect it to be there. And then boom, there's this giant thing just with like apartments and other buildings around it.
I seem to recall at one point we were lost looking for something and we kept running into the Pantheon and we couldn't.
I think so.
We couldn't find what we were actually looking for.
Because it was nearby, but there's lots of really narrow streets that definitely do not run on a grid. So anyway, it is an impressive building. It is more than 2,000 years old, and it is made of concrete. And again, if there's a lot of facts about the Pantheon, it is the world's largest unsupported concrete dome. It is still the world's largest unsupported concrete dome. And that's pretty incredible. I mean, that's pretty incredible compared to today's standards. And then you think that this was built in Roman times, which is truly quite astounding. And it's especially astounding to me to think of the history of concrete in general. But let's go back a little bit. So how on earth did the Romans build these things, and how are they still standing here today? And that's something that scientists have been puzzling over for a long time. Over the last, I believe, many decades, but especially in the last decade or so, they've been gathering more clues to understand the secret to their concrete. But really in 2023 is when they really feel like they've discovered sort of that missing piece of the puzzle. They had understood a lot of important differences or aspects of the concrete, but they think they found what makes it so strong. Now, we live in Winnipeg, and I don't have official numbers, but how long would you say concrete on our roads lasts in years?
Oh, on the
0.3.
Right?
I think that's generous.
Now, like, in total fairness, concrete's roads with our winters and snowplow equipment and all of that is a different story than concrete in buildings. But even still, concrete in buildings doesn't last all that long.
Nope.
The oldest buildings we have here in this city, at least, are still built with stone and bricks and that. Same thing in most old cities in North America here. We don't have concrete things that Well, I mean, when you
North
go to the
American
East
old.
Coast, you do get like 400-year-old, 500-year-old
True.
cities. Like that is getting to be quite old. But yes, it's not Roman
Yeah,
old.
but it's North American old.
Yes, exactly.
Not European old.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. Yes, contextually old. And when you talk about the prairies and that type of building, we're talking 200 years is really old, right?
Mhm.
But I digress. So we don't see concrete lasting that long, and yet the Colosseum is made of concrete. The Pantheon, rather, is made of concrete. Seawalls on the Italian coast were built thousands of years ago, and they're made of concrete, and they still stand. And that's
Really?
yes. Now, do they look
Wow.
the nicest? No, not necessarily.
No, they're
but they're
pitted.
still there. And this is really important because seawalls around the world are frequently built with concrete, and they erode very quickly because seawater is notoriously harsh on concrete.
Mm-hmm.
So how did they do it?
Magic.
Roman magic. So first, before we understand concrete, we have to understand cement a little bit, which is something that I thought was interchangeable words for many years of my life. I now know they are not the same. So use cement to create concrete. Concrete is the thing. Cement is the reactive part, and then concrete is once you add in the hard bits that give it structure, like small stones or sand or something like that. But the part that makes it hard and durable, that's concrete. And it's generally made of a mixture of different chemicals that when mixed together with some water, they react and they form really hard structures. And they generally release some heat and sometimes some carbon dioxide and so on and so forth. So Roman concrete is similar to the concrete that we think of today in that it includes...
I remember learning how much sand concrete requires. It's like one of the reasons why sand gets mined out of places to go other places because it's required for concrete.
And specific types of sand are preferred and or required. So it's silicates. So silica sand is very important, which actually there's a big controversial mining project that is trying to get approved here in Manitoba, just not too far from my parents' place, because there are apparently deep silica deposits there. So the cement requires silicates. So that's those sand or things made of silica. And it includes ash. And so Rome, Italy has volcanoes. So they had lots of ash around. And the type of ash is called pozzolan ash, but other types of ash or ash is similar from volcano to volcano. So it uses volcanic ash. And then it uses some calcium, which is often known as lime, or you would get it from limestone, which again is very abundant here in Manitoba. So these are not unusual things. When we mix these all together, they would create a decent cement, but it surprised scientists that it would be so hard and so durable. And how did it not lose its structure over time? So what they learned is that it's actually in the calcium and the types of calcium that were used in the cement making process that makes the Roman cement so incredible. So when we think of making cement, usually it's lime or calcium hydroxide that is used with that. And it's mixed into a slurry and it's mixed into the cement and it's somewhat reactive. It's part of what creates the exothermic process and gets the hardening going and gets some of the strength going.
She said hard.
Then scientists realized when they were analyzing the Roman concrete that there were, at first glance, what appeared to be impurities, little white calcium-type deposits throughout the concrete. And
Laura, were they teeth?
Yes,
were they teeth?
they were not. Oh my God, that's so dark,
That would
Lauren.
be truly horrifying, but also very Roman.
So if you died as a gladiator, did your teeth become part of the stadium?
Huxley has been wondering what the tooth fairy does with all of her teeth.
That's an important question on the road to becoming people like us.
Mhm.
No, they were not teeth. These were tiny, tiny things. Really specks or sometimes even microscopic little
Baby teeth.
calcium deposits. And so as modern researchers like to do, they like to say, well, that must be just impurities. Those ancient people knew nothing and blew it off. But then some researchers looked at it a little bit further and said, these people were incredibly precise with almost everything. That's weird that they would leave a whole lot of impurities in there. So then they analyzed it, and it's with the advent of some of our really incredible chemical analysis materials and technologies that I'm not going to get into because I don't understand them, that they recognized within this concrete there was the formation of different chemical structures that could only be made at very high temperatures that you would not expect to be in regular cement. And they also realized that the structure of these little calcium deposits was a result of this high temperature as well. So what they figured out that was happening is that the Romans weren't only using lime, but they were using quicklime, which is calcium oxide, which is significantly more reactive than calcium hydroxide, which then, as part of this mixture of the ash and the silicates and such, would speed up the reaction and cause higher temperatures and a higher curing temperature. And it would form these little crystals. Now, these crystals are really important because of their structure. When little cracks appear in cement, which in Roman cement, little cracks do appear, water starts to seep in, but because those crystals still have the highly reactive calcium forms in them, the water then reacts with that calcium, causing it to create some essentially calcium carbonate and fill in that crack and self-heal, which then strengthens the concrete and keeps its structural integrity.
Wow.
Very cool.
That's so cool.
And so things like seawater, sometimes they'll say it like reinforces it, but the natural cracks and things that would happen from stress and strain or erosion automatically get filled in with a hard, durable material. And do you know what is made of calcium carbonate? Oyster shells, which last very well in seawater. Right?
I need that.
So it's actually really incredible. Now, whether the Romans knew that this would happen or not, I don't know if they had that kind of forethought that it would happen. But they certainly knew that it created a very structurally sound concrete. And over time, they certainly learned that when they mixed it in this method, they didn't lose structural integrity and their buildings still stood, which would encourage them to keep doing that.
We know that people have always been as smart as people are now. And people have always been as curious as they are now. So yeah, as you were saying, I mean, if they didn't know, that they would have figured it out.
Yeah. And think about how many fewer distractions in life people had back then that they could actually focus on learning this stuff instead of looking at their stupid phones all the time, like myself.
They just didn't have the ability to look back at all of the previously gained knowledge on our phones.
Yes.
So they had to figure this all out from start. But the incredible thing to me about this mystery has always been how many centuries it took us to figure out how to make the same thing that they figured out in the Roman times.
So why do you think that is, Ashlyn?
I don't. This is like one of those things that I would periodically Google to figure out if they had figured it out. So I was really excited when they did figure it out, but I don't know why it took so long. Just people assuming that they knew better because they were new I don't know. Anybody
else have any thoughts?
I don't know that I have an answer to the question as it was asked, but I do feel like both as individuals and as societies, we're very inclined to status quo bias, I guess, or doing things the way they've always been done. And so this is the way we make concrete. It is cheap and easy, and it's just the way we do it. And it's possible, in my mind, that the Romans happened to have a good method. Maybe they encountered worse methods and said, well, this method is better. But they happened upon, for whatever reason, a good method. And they stuck with it, and maybe other civilizations happened upon worse methods and stuck with it too. I mean, yeah. But I don't know. Maybe, is there a better explanation, Laura?
Different civilizations have been using forms of concrete since far before the Roman Empire. We can see that. This particular technology of concrete disappeared after the fall of the Roman Empire because the recipe was lost. So people just didn't know how to make this type of concrete anymore. And as we know about Europe in the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, they liked churches, but building other stuff that wasn't connected to God, not top priority. And that. So we lost the information. We just didn't know how to do this kind of thing. And we didn't start figuring it out. It really wasn't until the very late 16th century and then the early 17th century that concrete became a thing in Europe again. It was actually 1824 where concrete, and the concrete more or less as we know it today, was invented about 200 years ago. Reinvented.
Yeah.
But it's a different mixture.
Sure.
It's a different mixture. So that's part of the reason why, Ashlyn, they didn't know for so long, because the recipe was lost for a really long time.
Yeah, like I know the recipe and the method was lost. I guess I thought you were asking, like,
Okay.
did I know why the scientists couldn't figure it out?
No. Sorry. To me, it was interesting that the recipe itself was lost. But even still, when concrete was discovered again, it's made very differently than it was back then.
They have been trying to figure out why, like, this formula was so much better for quite some time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it seems like it's the advance of technology to help us understand what's inside of these different things and to understand these different molecules and really parse it out, that the nanoparticular structure of things that we couldn't have done a long time ago.
Totally.
So
when they were building these structures, they weren't building them to survive for 2,000 years. Like, who knows what went away that we don't know about? Who knows what didn't work back then?
Right. Yeah. Like, there was definitely trial and error, and the stuff that we see today is the stuff that lasted, right? And they learn different things. So the newer method of concrete, which is called Portland concrete, Portland cement, which is used for concrete, is the method that we use today. It's still around, but it's far less durable, and it requires reinforcing and crumbles with water exposure as opposed to becomes strengthened and all of that. So it's really not as useful, but it's a heck of a lot cheaper to deal with, which in our society of, if there's money to be made, why would we not keep making money, right?
What is the environmental footprint like comparatively? Because I know that is a major issue with concrete.
For sure.
I'm not sure exactly from the initial curing. From what I read, some of it said because it cures a little bit faster, that might have a bit of an issue, or because of the temperature of curing, it might be a little bit less emissions. But when you think about how long it lasts, think about how many times you have to rebuild a bridge or a seawall or something like that.
Absolutely.
Compared to one of these that was built once and still stands. Or a road. Exactly. Right? So if we built it with this type of a self-healing, very strong type of concrete, we would save so much more emissions down the road because of it.
Down the road.
Would be a heck of a lot of Easter shelves. Easter shells? Oyster shells. That would be a heck of a lot of oyster shells. Wow, it's late.
It is late. Sorry. So that's really cool. After this discovery last year, and even before it, different companies and researchers have been trying to find different ways of self-healing concrete. And so now with this bit of extra information, it gives them more to go off of, another angle. Interestingly, they are trying the calcium method to see if it's marketable. Also, apparently there's research into using bacteria to self-heal concrete, which is wild, but really interesting to me.
Cool.
So, yeah, why not? But we have great evidence that this stuff works incredibly well. And while there are logistics, a fair number of them seem to be related more to capitalist greed than actual logistics issues.
Capitalism.
Oh. And that's my segment.
Awesome.
Nice.
I had never heard of this with the oyster shells, so That's really neat. And I'm going to go down a wiki hole tomorrow about it. From one, let's say, vacation destination mystery to another, Ashlyn, would you like to tell us about the Bermuda Triangle?
I would love to. As I mentioned earlier, and I feel like I've probably talked about on the podcast before, I went through quite a phase as a kid of really enjoying conspiracy theories and sort of the whole ancient aliens, who built the pyramids, let's talk about Atlantis, every documentary, every like garbage documentary that was on the History Channel or Discovery or whatever, I was all there for it. So I consumed a lot of information about the Bermuda Triangle, is what I'm saying.
I always thought it would take more of an impact in my life than it does.
All right.
Kind of like quicksand as you were growing up, right? Yeah, that was a fixture of our childhood.
Not as much of a worry as it was led to be.
Yep.
Because if you watch cartoons, quicksand is like the third biggest thing you have to worry about in adult life.
The Bermuda Triangle documentaries were always full of stories of planes and boats going missing, mostly in good weather. Nothing was amiss, and then they were just suddenly gone. That was the overall impression that I got from all of the information that I took in when I was very credible. The Bermuda Triangle itself is huge. It is 500,000 square miles. It stretches from the tip of Florida to Bermuda to Puerto Rico, depending on who you ask and when, which is just a huge amount of space with tons and tons of shipping lines going through it. And it has been plagued by stories of bad things happening ever since an article in the Argosy.
The Argosy?
The sort of the original article on the Bermuda Triangle was published in there. That was way back, sort of towards the end of World War II. Most of the Bermuda Triangle incidents happen between, I would say, World War II and 1965 or so. There are sort of reports of some stuff from the 1800s where boats went down in that area, but they were all, of course, like attributed later. Like the people who wrote the original articles found all this information and just added it onto their story. In addition to crafts and ships that went down in the actual defined area, no matter what that is, it wiggles around from Chesapeake Bay to Florida is considered part of the Bermuda Triangle sometimes, which is ridiculous. But boats that went down nowhere near this geographical area sometimes get included, including one that went down off the coast of Portugal, became sort of associated with the Bermuda Triangle for reasons of, well, it was a big ship, that mystery, so it must be associated with this somehow.
Now we're getting into the Bermuda Pentagon.
Yeah, exactly. At some point, the Bermuda Triangle just becomes the whole ocean. And that is sort of the crux of the issue. When you boil it down, the area within the Bermuda Triangle does not have any statistical increase in incidents relative to any other gigantic area of ocean with that many shipping lanes going through it. So unfortunately, the answer to the Bermuda Triangle is statistics. Statistically, nothing is happening there.
The ocean is very big and deep. The end.
I think that is my favorite skeptical lesson of all, and one of the most important ones. Never waste your time trying to explain why something is happening until you've determined that something is happening.
Exactly. The list of incidents that happened in the Bermuda Triangle includes some that do seem shocking or extremely improbable if you take each of them individually. For example, there is Flight 19, which was 5 military pilots who went down in fighter jets and just sort of, according to all of the sources at the time, sort of blinked out of existence. And there's no no explanation was offered as to why something would have gone wrong. But again, it's a big piece of land. It is an area of ocean where big storms come up frequently without warning. It was 1945, and occasionally weird things that are very improbable happen. And if you're talking about a 500,000 mile, like square mile piece of land, weird things that are very improbable are going to happen there occasionally. And if you amalgamate enough stories from a big enough area, you can make anything seem weird.
Yep. Sample size.
There have been some fun explanations in addition to supernatural issues. Maybe it has a strange effect on compasses and stuff. Nothing found modernly to support that. Human error, probably a huge contributor to these things, much more than the fact that compasses they aren't totally accurate and they aren't totally the same, especially if you're crossing an area as large as, for example, Bermuda to Florida. The heading that you need to go to for like magnetic north versus actual north is going to change over that long a distance of ocean. My favorite explanation is the methane. Has anybody heard about the methane and the Bermuda Triangle?
I don't think so.
Whale farts?
So the theory is that there are huge pockets of methane trapped under the ocean floor, and occasionally they get let loose and they bubble up, and the resulting loss of buoyancy in the water can just sort of suck a ship down in seconds because it just kind of falls into a hole in the ocean.
Oh, I had heard that actually.
Yeah. I feel like maybe they tested on Mythbusters even. They have done scale models also to show that it is possible to create a loss of buoyancy like that, but there is no evidence to support any large release of gas anywhere in the Bermuda Triangle for the past 15,000 years.
Wow.
So, yeah. I also was very entertained by the Wikipedia list of Bermuda Triangle incidents. Essentially, there are incidents from, again, World War II or the 1800s for the ship ones, right up until, 1965. And then there's a few incidents in the 2000s that were, way less interesting than the other. A lot of the original Bermuda stories were they disappeared without a trace. Nothing was ever found. And now most of the incidents have little footnotes of this was found in 2020, this was found in whatever. And then the 2000 incidents are all, here's what the probable explanation was, and they found the wreckage, and yada yada. It's gotten so much less interesting.
Yeah. What is the quote that technology is magic if you don't have the tools to detect it or something?
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
That's the one.
Yeah. So now we have the technology to detect, so it's no longer magic.
Yeah. One of the guys who has been promoting heavily the, I guess, theory, what word am I looking for? Has been promoting the idea that the Bermuda Triangle is not really a thing. I really liked this line in the article. Australian scientist says probabilities are the leading cause of the Bermuda Triangle disappearances. And he's been beating this drum for quite a few years now, and I guess he just sort of resurfaces every few years when people go, the Bermuda Triangle has been solved? ? So yeah, that is the explanation. Enjoyed looking into that.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thanks.
Very cool.
Okay, so we're 3 for 3 on the explanation not being Yetis.
Shit.
Yeah.
The next one's got to be Yetis.
Yeah, exactly. Probability tells us.
Well, Jem, you have the most metal title of any segment I think we've ever done on this show. Please tell me that it is Yetis that cause blood rain and meat showers.
Oh.
On the 25th of July, 2001, rain began to fall on Kerala. a state on the southwest coast of India. The rain fell for days and days, flooding much of Kottayam and Idukki districts. Now, it's not particularly strange to see rain in India in July, even rain in this volume. What made this particular rain remarkable was its color. It was blood red.
Let the blood rain from the sky!
It stained people's clothing. It ran red in the streets. According to archived articles from the Times of India, the phenomenon was preceded by a loud thunderclap and a flash of light in the sky, and people reported trees spontaneously shedding their leaves, which lay gray and burnt upon the ground as the rain fell. The rains continued off and on for weeks, then months, until September. They were sometimes yellow, sometimes green, sometimes black, but most often they were red. Streets and homes were flooded with water the color of blood. Photographs from the incident, which you can see online, are reminiscent of a Cecil B. DeMille film. A review of historical reports actually shows previous incidents of blood rain documented in Kerala in 1896 and in 1957, and the phenomenon occurred again in 2012. Have you all seen pictures of this?
I
I
have.
haven't. No.
Yeah.
Sounds awful.
I'll send a picture in the chat here so you can see it. See this, Laura?
It's so red.
Wow.
Hardcore.
That's like a lot of pigment, whatever it is.
In fact, there isn't just historical precedent in Kerala. There are stories of blood rain throughout history, throughout the world. On just a little slice of European history here, the earliest known reference to blood rain occurs in Homer's Iliad, in which Zeus calls down a rain of blood as a sign of grief over the impending death of his son, one of his sons, Sarpedon. Quote, "He shed a rain of blood upon the earth in honor of his son, whom Patroclus was about to kill on the fertile plain of Troy, far from his home." In 582 CE, Gallo-Roman historian Gregory of Tours recorded that, quote, "In the territory of Paris there rained real blood from the clouds, falling upon the garments of many men, who were so stained and spotted that they stripped themselves of their own clothing in horror." The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded, quote, "There was a bloody rain in Britain, and milk and butter were turned to blood, and Lothair, king of Kent, died," which would place this occurrence sometime around 685 CE. Similarly, the Chronicum Scotorum, a collection of reports from medieval Ireland, claims that in 878, quote, "It rained a shower of blood, which was found in lumps of gore and blood on all the plains in Chinocta," attributing the phenomenon to the power of the Druids. William of
Lumps of
Newbow.
gore seems really extra.
William of Newburgh, a contemporary chronicler of the life of King Richard the Lionheart, wrote that in May of 1198, when King Richard was working amongst his men to complete the construction of Chateau Gaillard in Normandy, he and his laborers were all drenched in a rain of blood. William of Newburgh reports that while the king's advisors considered this an ill omen, an opinion that was lent weight by the fact that this new fortification contravened a treaty that he had signed with Philip II of France just a few years earlier, William goes on to write, quote, "The king was not moved by this to slacken one whit the pace of work, in which he took such keen pleasure that, unless I am mistaken, even if an angel had descended from heaven to urge his abandonment, he would have been roundly cursed." So one more historical instance of blood rain in Europe. So the final example that I'll cite comes from Book 2 of Historia Regum Britanniae, the History of the Kings of Britain, which includes the following passage, quote, "At last, Cunadagius dying was succeeded by his son Revallo, a fortunate youth, who diligently applied himself in the affairs of the government. In his time it rained blood 3 days together, and there fell vast swarms of flies, followed by a great mortality among the people. Historia Regum Britanniae should not be taken as a reliable document, of course. Geoffrey of Monmouth, the author, was known to take, shall we say, some liberties with history, and books 8 through 10 of Historia are largely concerned with Merlin and King Arthur. Though the document is also noteworthy for containing the earliest known reference to the story of King Lear, who apparently was the great-grandfather of Ravallo, this fortunate youth whose kingdom was troubled by blood rains and swarms of flies.
Believe that.
So at this point in my research, I heard Laura calling my name from the other room, and I suddenly realized that I had just been reading like ancient European history for what seemed like an age. So I bookmarked the history of the kings of Britain.
You straight men. You can't stop thinking about it.
Once you hit 40, you either have to choose the Middle Ages or World War II, Jim.
Yeah, I was watching this thing about Rommel on the History Channel. He was kind of, oh my God, I'm 59!
Choose your path
Okay,
wisely.
it's Middle Ages all the way. Okay. I've got a few months left to make the choice. But
back to 2012 Kerala.
2001 Kerala. 2012,
sorry.
the 2012 rain comes later. But anyway, as I said, though this 12th century chronicle of British kings was taken as a genuine historical account until like at least the 1500s, it has been widely discredited. I really like Wikipedia's description of it. The Wikipedia editors say that it has no historical value. Quote, when events described, such as Julius Caesar's invasions of Britain, can be corroborated from contemporary histories, that's Geoffrey of Monmouth, Geoffrey's account can be seen to be wildly inaccurate. Reading that, I couldn't help but think of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Although it has many omissions, contains much that is apocryphal, or at least wildly inaccurate.
Okay, so there's no reason to believe that any particular historical account of blood rain actually happened as described. Though there certainly are a lot of them, and they're fun to read about. I've described only a handful. But we know that the event in Kerala happened. We have photographic evidence, for what little that's worth these days. So, what caused it? Well, there have been multiple possible explanations of blood rains suggested over the years. The earliest explanation from Homer and his contemporaries is, of course, the supernatural one, that this is a literal rain of blood brought on by the wrath of the gods. The second explanation, closely related to the first, and suggested by many early classical commentators, and even going into the Middle Ages, like the 12th century Bishop Euthasius of Thessalonica, is that, yes, it was actually a rain of blood. Sure, it was blood, but it was still a natural event. There's like a big battle, there's loads of blood everywhere, it got washed into the waterways, then it evaporated, and then the blood rained down again. Blood goes up, blood comes down. The only problem is that like that's not how evaporation and distillation work. Like the blood, parts of the blood don't actually evaporate into the sky.
That would be horrifying if what went up came down.
You do get water spout phenomena, right? Like we've talked about those on the show before, like where you get the raining of frogs and like that.
I actually thought that that's where this was kind of probably going, but that seems like less likely now.
So a third suggestion, and the prevailing hypothesis for quite some time, was that these red rains were caused by iron oxide or rust in the water, or by contamination of the rainwater by reddish dust from the Sahara Desert, or the Arabian Peninsula, or just dried nearby swampland. There were some like Renaissance experiments to sort of confirm these, and they found that, yeah, you can get like reddish water by mixing reddish dust into the water. Science!
It's called the Penzic theory.
So, coming back to this specific account of blood rain, the Center for Earth Science Studies was one of the first bodies to investigate the Kerala blood rain back in 2001, and they had another hypothesis. Shortly after the event began, so while the rain was still going on, they claimed that the red rain was likely the result of an airburst, an explosion of a meteorite in the atmosphere, which released approximately 1,000 kilos, about a ton, or exactly a ton, a metric ton, depending on which ton you're using, meteoric dust in the atmosphere.
I don't think I made my sigh audible enough.
That is a very cool explanation, though.
CESS thinks that it's an airburst, like a meteorite explodes in the atmosphere, releases a whole bunch of like dust, basically, thus explaining the explosive sound and flash that was seen in the sky preceding the rain. A few days after endorsing the meteorite hypothesis, though, the Center for Earth Sciences Studies retracted their earlier statement. The rains were continuing, and you wouldn't typically see the dust sort of stay in the atmosphere from like maybe from an impact event. You get a bunch of dust thrown up into the atmosphere, but an airburst is sort of a one and done. And this rain kept going on. In addition, they had done some pretty basic light microscopy, which revealed that the water from Kerala contained not meteoric dust particles, but particles that resembled fungal spores.
Ooh.
But why not both? 2 years after the event, Godfrey LUEE and A. Santosh Kumar, physicists at the Mahatma Gandhi University in Kerala, posted an article on the archive.org preprint server titled Cometary Panspermia Explains the Red Rain of Kerala, explaining, quote, considering its correlation with a meteor airburst event, this phenomenon raised an extraordinary question whether the cells are extraterrestrial. Here we show how the observed features of the red rain phenomenon can be explained by considering the fragmentation and atmospheric disintegration of a fragile cometary body that presumably contains a dense collection of red cells. Slow settling of the cells in the stratosphere explains the continuation of the phenomenon for 2 months. The red cells under study appear to be the resting spores of an extremophilic microorganism. Possible presence of these cells in the interstellar clouds is speculated from its similarity in UV absorption with the 217.5 nanometer UV extinction feature of interstellar clouds.
This sounds completely bonkers.
So crucial to the extraterrestrial hypothesis from these gentlemen was the claim that these spores that were isolated by light microscopy contained no DNA, which obviously all living organisms that we know of on Earth contain DNA. So LUEE, one of the authors, went on to claim that while they had no DNA, these cells were still able to reproduce after being autoclaved for hours.
What?
It later became clear that LUEE, a physicist, not a biologist, had not been able to detect the DNA from these spores because he used the wrong kind of stain. So the stain was designed for bacteria and not fungal spores. Bacterial spores don't have a thick cell wall, or most bacterial spores, I think, maybe some of them do. But fungi do have this thick cell wall that prevents staining from most types of stain. So, what actually happened? Well, these are in fact spores. They are fungal spores. And I've got a picture right here that I will once again post. This is a very visual episode that our listeners will not be able to appreciate. But this is a picture of a common lichen on a tree in India.
Oh.
And notice the color.
Mm-hmm. Tasty.
A joint report issued by the Center for Earth Science Studies, CESS, the Government of India's Department of Science and Technology, and the Tropical Botanical Garden and Research Institute said, quote, the color was found to be due to the presence of a large amount of spores of a lichen-forming alga belonging to the genus Trentipolia. Field verification showed that the region had plenty of such lichens. Samples of lichen taken from Chaganacheri area when cultured in an algal growth medium also showed the presence of the same species of algae. Both samples, from rainwater and from trees, produced the same kind of algae, indicating that the spores seen in rainwater most probably came from local sources. A subsequent visit to the site of the rains in August revealed that nearly every porous surface was now covered in Trentipolia lichens. So it is not clear how all of the lichen spores got into the clouds. It's possibly like a waterspout phenomenon, as with the rain of frogs that we've talked about in the past. but these spores are quite small and were hugely dispersed in the atmosphere generally. And they bloomed during the rainfall, or there appeared to be an algal bloom during the rainfall. So when I told the story to Kira, our almost 11-year-old, today, she said, "Whoa, creepy," when I told her about the blood rain. And she seemed a little disappointed when I explained the spores. She thought it was cool, but I feel like she was looking for like a more creepy explanation. But then she said, "Wait, what was that huge bang in the sky then?" So if it wasn't a meteor exploding,
the Yeti.
what was it? So it's funny because I actually wondered the same thing myself. Like, it's possible that there was an airburst meteor, I'm not sure. But you know what else is possible? It was a thunderstorm.
Oh, God.
Some
I was
such
all ready
incidents.
to come up with a cooler explanation. Like, I know sometimes trees explode in the winter in Canada because they get too cold, but that doesn't make a ton of sense in India. Like, what got the tree spores into the... I don't know. Yeah. Thunderstorm. Cool. Great.
When you're... When you're really settled on these weird explanations, sometimes you forget the basic stuff. Oh, there was a bang and a flash in the sky, and then a bunch of rain started. Well, however, there are some incidents like this that are a little harder to explain. So, case in point, the Kentucky meat shower. Have you all heard of this?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
So, on the 3rd of March, 1876, around 11 in the morning, Mrs. Crouch was standing on the porch of her home in Bath County, Kentucky, when she saw a large piece of meat fall from the sky, hitting the earth with a wet thud about 25 meters from her door. It was followed by another, then another.
Free meat.
This meat shower lasted for about an hour, scattering what appeared to be slabs of beef over an area of about 60 square meters of Kentucky countryside. The pieces of meat were 5 to 10 centimeters on a side, and according to a contemporaneous account in Scientific American, tasted like either mutton or venison.
Oh,
Wait,
no.
I thought they were beef.
Well, they looked like beef, but they didn't taste like beef. Many possible explanations for this meat shower have been offered over the years, including the blood rain phenomenon we've just discussed. At the time, the prevailing hypothesis was that the meat did not fall from the sky, and indeed wasn't even meat. It was nostoc, a gelatinous colony of cyanobacteria, also known as star jelly, troll's butter, and fallen star. These bacterial colonies are often missed when they're dry, but in wet weather they expand, foaming up from the ground, and thus can appear to be like raining down from the sky because you see the rain falling and then they puddle on the ground.
Would not taste like mutton.
They were once believed to float on the breeze until it rained. Apparently they do have like quite an umami taste, but they certainly wouldn't have a meaty texture. And unfortunately for this explanation, despite this being called the Kentucky meat rain, Mrs. Crouch claimed that it was not actually raining at the time when the meat fell, so that doesn't really follow. However, apparently 7 samples were sent to various scientists who confirmed that at least 2 of them were lung tissue, 3 seemed to be muscle tissue, and 2 were said to be made of cartilage.
What year was this again?
This was 1876.
Oh, okay.
So the explanation that was favored by Scientific American, which was also the explanation presented by Dr. Louis D. Kastenbein contemporaneously, according to writing in the Louisville Medical News, and also the favorite explanation of locals apparently at the time, was that the meat rain was vulture ejecta. That is to say, buzzard puke.
Follow the buzzard! So
When one vulture is sick, or sometimes even is just startled, it will vomit up what it has recently eaten. And apparently, other vultures in the area will follow suit under the presumption that they've all been feeding on the same meat, and thus if it was contaminated, they'll all throw it up kind of at the same time as a protective mechanism. Like some kind of horrifying Family Guy episode. So that is apparently the current, still prevailing hypothesis for the meat rain. A bunch of buzzards were flying over the area and all threw up.
That's nasty.
That's horrifying.
I expected that someone was experimenting with wildlife and explosives.
Yeah,
That's where I thought you were going.
I feel
with
like
that.
there was a meat rain in one of the first season episodes of Lost, right?
Don't bring up
Whoa, I don't
those
remember
bad
that.
memories.
I think there was in the X-Files, definitely. There was meat rain.
So that's the end of the blood and meat rain.
One of the most pedantic things I've ever done on this podcast, which is saying a lot, is look up vultures versus buzzards when you interchange them there. And they are different, apparently. But vultures are often called buzzards incorrectly.
It's
And
a
condors
buffalo
are also...
bison situation, hey?
Yeah. Buzzards, vultures, and condors, they're all closely related, but not the same.
Well, I appreciate the pedantic correction, Ashlyn. Why don't we move on to something, well, let's move on to something not so nice before we move on to something nice.
Can I just say, I know we should talk about it, but I would rather just not exist in this world right now.
It's
okay,
extremely
they want us not
stuff.
to.
I know, that's giving in.
So I'll set the stage here, I guess, since it's related to my segment from last episode. So the province of Alberta, I don't want to throw all Albertans under the bus. There are many of them, including two of the people who started this podcast with us many years ago, currently reside in Alberta. Alberta is currently led by Premier Danielle Smith of the right-wing United Conservative Party. Smith, for those unfamiliar with her, is cozy with Tucker Carlson, who recently visited Alberta.
Barf.
And Russia.
Yeah. So Smith recently announced sweeping changes to the law in Alberta, the provincial law. Alberta, for those not Canadian, is just a province, two provinces away from us. It's on the other side of the prairies.
Alberta is our Texas. That's all you need to know.
Alberta is widely seen as the Texas of the North. It is the province that exports all of the oil via the various pipelines, etc. So Smith recently announced changes to the law pertaining to trans youth in the province. So the changes affect both medical and social transition. So first, changes to school. Sex education in schools will move to an opt-in basis rather than an opt-out basis. So rather than opting your kid being able to opt your kids out of sex ed, you will have to opt your kids in to sex ed in the province of Alberta. So this includes lessons on right. This includes lessons on gender identity and sexual orientation. And as Laura pointed out when we were discussing this the other day, that just means nobody is going to get sex education. Nobody opts into anything.
No. It's extra work. And how many of us have said, like, oh, I should do that, but I just, Whereas if you're just automatically enrolled, you're just like, meh. And we're not even talking about, like, important things. Like, when you look at organ donations, countries move specifically to opt-out models because it drives up organ donation eligibility significantly.
Yeah.
Now, this is a different context, right? Because you're not asked to think about your own mortality. But when people have to opt in, they just don't get around to it. Even if they believe in that thing, or they forget, and then this and that, right? If you have to opt out, only the people who are super motivated are going to do that.
I am pretty sure that my sex ed in school was essentially opt-in. Like, we had to bring a form home that our parents had to fill out that was like, yes, I want you to have sex ed, or no, I don't. And if you didn't fill it in, you didn't get to go.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common in the United States. I don't recall.
Was that not your experience?
Well, I don't think we have filled out any forms.
So for Kira, because Kira's like family life started last year, we got information saying that we are going to be talking about this and like that these topics are coming up. And you always have the opportunity to call the school and to tell them and things like that. But it wasn't a permission form. It was just an FYI, this is what we're doing next week.
Which is the way it should be, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's important information for people to have access to.
I have like such a core memory of my mom snatching that form out of my hand and filling it out to be like, yes, someone else is going to tell you about this and I don't have to.
I've been waiting for this day.
So more pointedly pertinent to our topic last month, kids under 16 will not be able to socially transition at school without their parents' consent. So they will not be able to choose a different name or pronouns without their parents' consent. And kids aged 17 and 16 can change their name or pronouns without their parents' permission, if they're 16 or 17. But schools are still required to notify their parents that this change was made.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's the exact outing to their parents that we talked about. I covered some of the reasons that's very bad on the bonus pod last month. No word on whether parents will be notified every time their kids get a new nickname that they ask to be called by. I look forward to the permission form when Huxley wants to go by Hux.
Like Angela would be off the table, but Hugo Popcorn Pants, no problem.
Yeah. So in addition, looking beyond social transition, this change also denies access to puberty blockers for those under 16. So it denies
when
access
they need them
to puberty blockers until they're no longer relevant. It denies access to gender-affirming hormone therapy for those under 16, which is, as I mentioned, distinct from puberty blockers. Those are two separate interventions. They're complementary to each other. And it also denies access to gender-affirming surgery for those under 18. Now, this is a relatively small change. It's an important one, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but this effectively is only a change for those seeking chest masculinization surgery, which was previously permitted for those 16 and older. But bottom surgery already required that the patient had reached the age of majority. And most, I believe all medical associations that I'm familiar with recommend waiting until the age of majority for bottom surgery. There are a lot of complex sort of reasons. You want the tissue to have finished growing and like that.
That's a big one. That if you do it early enough, especially in people assigned male at birth, it's going to be...
Yeah.
You could end up with problems.
Yeah, so exceptions for the puberty blocker and hormone therapy rules are apparently going to be made for those who have already started those treatments. They will be allowed to continue them. But these changes appear to have been made without consultation with either educators or medical professionals. I read an interview with Dr. Sam Wong, the Alberta Medical Association's head of pediatrics. He spoke to Global News, and he was quick to question the government's priorities, saying, why are they talking about this issue when there are so many other issues going on in healthcare? Why are they picking on this patient at this particular point in time?
I've seen a few good sort of mass letters signed by Alberta pediatricians and Alberta physicians, etc.
Yeah, and we can link to a bunch of this in the show notes, including this article. Dr. Wong also noted that denying access to puberty blockers, in addition to bringing about the irreversible changes that we talked about in the show, it actually may result in increased numbers of patients seeking more invasive gender-affirming surgery. I'll quote Dr. Wong here, quote, "We use puberty blockers to stop puberty once it starts, so they're allowed to stay in a state of stasis, so puberty does not progress, and that allows them a few years to think about their decision and whether they want to move forward with more gender-affirming care, or whether they want to stop the puberty blockers and restart puberty. Puberty blocking actually has benefits for gender-divergent patients by preventing the development of mature secondary sex characteristics, so that later in life, the most invasive gender-affirming surgery may not be necessary if the patient moves forward with gender-affirming care."
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to need to do a lot of, or you're not going to have, for trans women, as much masculinizing facial surgery and tracheal shaves, and in some cases, torso reconstruction and reshaping. there are multiple types of surgeries rather than other than the kind of obvious ones for the basic sexual characteristics that we think about that happen. A lot of these are extremely invasive, and it's really easy to prevent the need for them. And this policy is just going to harm patients and may, as Lauren mentioned, end up killing some.
The risks compared to the benefits are so small, and this is so short-minded and evil.
Yeah.
And we've said before, but puberty blockers have been used for not only for gender-affirming care for trans patients, but for gender-affirming care for cis patients, or for many other reasons, like from stopping prepubescent puberty, like early puberty.
Precocious puberty, yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. And they're not a new science.
And presumably, Premier Smith would continue to allow 4-year-olds with precocious puberty to take hormone blockers, puberty blockers.
But if they come out as trans later, would they have to stop?
Absurd. Maddening. Yeah. And like a lot of these surgeries are still permitted. This is obviously a touchy subject, but you're still allowed to perform a circumcision, right? Mm-hmm. And that's done without the patient's consent, right?
Yeah. And as far as I've read, there's been no carve out for intersex individuals as well, with this new pronouncement from the Alberta government.
And as I covered last month, intersex folks are so much more common than these fucking bigots would ever believe.
Yeah. I have seen... and go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, as I believe we've mentioned before, happily, we're not typically doing non-consensual surgery on young intersex children anymore. Mm-hmm. But once they reach the age where they understand their bodies and the context and their gender identity and what they want to do, presumably, like anyone else, we would want them to have control over their bodies and the choice that they could make.
Right, and I'd love to give them the option of hormone blockers until they figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not everybody has it figured out by age 8 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings hadn't even come out until I was in 11th grade.
Back to
I owned
Gems.
a house by the time it came out, Jem.
This is a throwback to Jem identifying as dwarf.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to lighten the mood a little bit.
So one thing I have seen lightening the mood a bit is there's been a major pushback on this from more Albertans than I thought would be possible. Me tarring them all with the conservative brush. But there has been quite a bit of an outcry from these concerned parents that the Premier is so wanting to protect their rights, but there's been so many saying this is bullshit. And yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll continue the fight.
Time to start burning shit, folks.
I am really scared about what the polling indicates is coming at the next election and how fast and far this will spread.
In the United States, you mean?
No, here.
Yeah,
the conservatives get in federally.
Yeah.
For months, I've been saying to Laura, there's no chance that Biden wins the American election.
Well, there's no chance that Trudeau wins it here.
Yeah,
or whoever is running the NDP federally at election time.
Yeah, unfortunately not. I mean, I'm no Trudeau fan, but just as I'm no Biden fan, but I certainly don't want the Republicans or the Conservatives in.
Yeah. Have to keep strengthening these communities, but I know that there are so many people out there that don't have the privileges that we have.
Yeah.
Very much. I really don't know how to transition this into something nice.
That's what the music is for, Lauren.
Well, let's just end on an up note then. It's got something nice.
I have a couple. I have some things nice. Just quickly, I watched a new movie on Netflix, I want to say. Is it on Netflix?
Which one?
Nimona with the kids. I think it's on Netflix.
I believe so.
It is lovely. I think it's based on a comic that I haven't read. I believe the comic creator is trans. It is just a lovely, fun movie. It is the kind of movie that parents and kids and adults and people of all ages can watch and enjoy. It is very funny and fun. It has a great message. It also has some just queer characters for, quote, no reason in it. Like, there's relationship normalization, which is great. And it has a lovely message. And it's just like, I grinned through it the whole thing. It was just a delight. So I highly recommend it. Nimona. It looks great. Very funny. And the kids loved it too. And then I've been playing a new video game. It's called Dredge. It's sort of you're a fisherman and like dredging the depths in a small island community. And it's super creepy and fun. Really delightful. Came out last year. Didn't have a chance to play it until now. And yeah, I would give it a recommendation.
Very cool.
A thumb up.
I have a video game, something nice, except I can't remember if I talked about it last month. I just want to talk about playing Super Mario Wonder with Dave, but I don't remember if I said that.
I don't think you did.
I don't think so.
No, because I would have echoed that. That's great.
Yeah, I think, Jamie, you've talked about Super Mario Wonder as something nice before, but we got it for Christmas, and Dave and I have played all of it now, I think, except for we are currently on the final battle badge challenge, and we have so far spent something like 300 or 400 lives learning how to do it. It is frustrating, but also fun.
Yep,
It's making me a better platformer.
Yeah, that's the one level that I still have not beat. I haven't gone back to it. I gave it a run on my last day in Churchill and didn't finish it.
We can get through 8 or 9 sections now. Yeah, it's taken us a lot of farming for lives, and it's just been a really fun activity with Dave. And also today I fed 15 people custom quesadillas, and I'm pretty proud of that.
Cool.
We're pretty wicked. All right. Laura, do you have something nice?
No. What's been going on since the last time we chatted? Oh, gosh, what's something nice? Yeah, it was okay. My something nice, I guess, has been having Jem around more. He's been more flexible in his schedule, and it's just been nice to come home to another human and that.
Very nice. I'll use host prerogative to go last. My something nice is next month for our March show, it will be our 200th episode. So
goodness.
Yeah.
Hard to believe.
Join us then, folks. How long have we've been doing this? Well, you guys have been doing this for over a decade. I joined.
Yeah. We started in 2010.
Yeah. My first show was when we were still living on Maryland, so it was over a decade now, because we've been in this house for, it'll be 9 years, so yeah.
We'll make it something special, so tune in next month.
All right. And we will talk to you then. Thank you, everybody, for being buzzkills with me and yet again proving that we haven't had anything that's been proven to be a Yeti.
And the Yeti!
Always a pleasure to be a buzzkill, Lauren. You know that.
Yeah, and we'll have to actually start the Eleanor of Aquitaine podcast. I've done so much research. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Show notes and references for all of our episodes are available at lueepodcast.com, where you can also find links to donate or get in touch. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is with a review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you found us, or by sharing this episode with a friend.
Life. Don't talk to me about life.
Maybe Richard should have listened. Maybe if Richard had listened, Pierre Bazile's hand might have slipped, and the line wouldn't have fallen to an ant. That's a little joke for all the Richard I heads out there.
Thank you.
All three of
Appreciate
you.
it.
Okay, so Marissa, you can put this in the outtakes or something, I guess, but the context here is that in March of 1199, Richard the Lionheart laid siege to a small castle in France called Chalut-Chabrol. It was basically unarmed. It was like this tiny little castle. I don't remember why he was laying siege to this castle, but anyway, after a few days, Richard, during the siege, was hit in the shoulder by a crossbow bolt and got gangrene. And he, as he lay dying, he called to his men to have the scoundrel who had shot him from the battlements of the castle to be brought before him. And this person, who turned out to be a small boy, usually called Peter or Pierre Basile, but there are a bunch of other names that are given. He said that he shot at Richard because Richard had killed his dad and his brothers, and that he wanted to kill Richard in revenge. And, Richard, being Richard, gave a hearty laugh and said, "Live on, and by my bounty behold the light of day." And he ordered that his men let the kid go with like 100 shillings. So that's a nice story. And then, of course,
how much was 100
chroniclers...
shillings back then, though?
Plenty, I imagine. And then chroniclers said, for years that the lion by the ant was slain because Richard then succumbed to his gangrene. Sorry, Laura, you were sighing?
Oh, just humanity continues to learn nothing from itself.
Speaking of which, according to at least one historian, right after Richard died, Pierre was captured by mercenaries and flayed alive. So
thanks, Jim. Why couldn't you leave it at the happy part? Come on.
Well,
anyway,
Richard was also doing the siege because they had found Roman coins nearby.
Oh yeah. Remember there was a rumor. I don't know if that was confirmed, but there's a rumor that there was like a big amount of Roman coinage there.
And he was suppressing a revolt by a viscount.
Yeah. Richard is interesting.
Okay, this is not the Richard
extremely anti-Semitic, even by the day's standards. Also, didn't speak a word of English.
Stop.
No.
Okay, fine. Let's get back to it.
I'll have you as a guest on my Eleanor of Aquitaine podcast, and we can talk about it.
Please save your pod for another time, okay?
I really liked Baudolino by Umberto Eco.